Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Brian Lovner with BLVE Consults, and this is the second in a series of discussions that we're having with leaders in the Calgary area in regards to the organization structural grant offered by Calgary Arts Development. I'm excited to have with me today Jennifer Martin, who calls herself a freelance CEO and works in a consultancy that focuses on leadership and strategy, working directly with Interim executive support. For our purposes, Jennifer is a former board member and Interim executive director of Beakerhead in Calgary, which recently completed a merger with Telus Spark. The interesting thing is that Jennifer was also the founding CEO of Telus Spark. So we are excited to have Jennifer Martin joining us today. Thanks for being here. And I'm going to start right up and say, tell us a little bit about the merger between Beakerhead and Telus Spark.
Sure. Thanks, Brian. It makes a lot of sense to anybody who knows the organizations. Both have a foundation of engagement and communication of science. Beakerhead, more an event-based organization, popping up once a year with a big spectacle, and the Science Center Telus Spark being a through the year kind of organization, but both sharing that interest in enhancing and improving the engagement and the confidence and, if you will, scientific literacy of our population. So, geez, if you're going to put two organizations together, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't it happen before? We can talk a little bit about that, but the real issue I think at hand to think about, and I think the complementarity, but also some of the challenges that we faced in the process, is that Beakerhead is an event-based organization, and Spark is a foundational, got a building, got operations, got lights to turn on, and so culturally and operationally, those are two very different organizations, even if they have the same mandate.
Can you speak a little bit about the process that you went through in the merger, and the length of time it took, and the number of involved parties?
Sure. Now this is something that had been discussed in bits and pieces over many years when I was still the CEO at Telus Spark and the executive director at Beakerhead, and I had a very good relationship working and talking with each other through all this. Talked about bits and pieces of this, but never really in an official way. So the trigger was twofold. One, as that executive director moved on to become the CEO of Telus Spark when I left that position. And then the next director came in, and the pandemic. And I won't say that the pandemic caused the next director to leave. It was a great professional opportunity for him to take. But the pandemic exacerbated things. And so that was really a point in time where the board of Beakerhead really needed to think, what is the future of this little organization?
What resources does the board need in that moment to sort of allow these ideas and these concepts to continue to progress? And you can speak to it from, what resources you did have and perhaps what resources you didn't have.
So in terms of resources, we really did a good quick search of what's available out there. There's some lovely primers about what, mergers, the thoughtfulness, the sort of strategy and philosophy behind it. Some practical information, but we didn't find the depth of practical information that we were looking for, which is, I think, something that this sort of a conversation can help a lot with. And the board, interested members of the board dabbled into that and found pieces. I, as the interim executive director, had to dig deep into it. And this is when the opportunity with CADA coincidentally lined up. I literally saw the article in the Globe and Mail and picked up the phone and said, hey, what can we do? Because we're ready for a conversation in this area. And there were two key things that would have helped us in our situation. One is case studies. And maybe that's because that's the way I think, but it's also the way I did my MBA program. But to be able to recognize the steps that some other organizations gone through, how they did that, and literally take it to a storytelling opportunity. And you see the resource details that pop out of that. The second was a very practical issue that we dealt with, which is the Canadian Revenue Agency rules. In an asset transfer, which are our lawyers understood this is where we were going. There were some very specific issues that come up that we did not know. And until we found them, we were spinning. And that is the whole process of retained liabilities. And, we can get into that if we want to, but it was that level of technical tax detail that put us a stick in the spokes for quite some time and caused antipathy to build. And, and a little bit of that issue of all of these mergers is trust.
Tell me more about trust.
Sure. I go back to remembering why we're here in the first place. We are members of a community in the cultural sector that knows that there are ways and means to enrich our community and needs in our community. And like organizations share that, but then see different paths to get there. And where I think trust can break down is twofold. One is who's got the right path. And that's a little silly on one hand, but we do, when stressed, we kind of drop down into some of those basic human responses. And the second is control. And personally, one of those things that comes into it is learning to let go of control. If you want to partner with somebody, you can't always be holding that steering wheel and expect a partner to come along on your ride. And sharing that is the difficult part in any partnership, and even more so when you're offering to another organization to take on all of the values and benefits, and yes, financial assets and brand of the organization you have.
What advice would you give to other organizations considering some kind of change in this vein, whether that be a merger, an amalgamation, sunsetting?
I think the key word you just expressed is change. We all know that we must continue to surf, bob, weave, work within the other changes that happen in our communities, in the economy, in the environment. And this is one of those aspects of being attuned to change and opportunity that comes with it. And, pushing your ego back and appreciating that why are we here? We're here because the community has needs that we uniquely can fulfill. And that might mean that we no longer exist, but that what we have built in terms of knowledge, in terms of brand, in terms of experience can be better carried forward in a different model altogether. So appreciating change at any point is, I think, the most important piece here, which should give some comfort to these are good discussions to have.
Jennifer Martin, thank you for joining us today and for being a part of this process. For more information on this case study, see our website at www.blveconsults.com.